Story 1. The elevator in Blackridge Tower had 12 floors. Everyone knew that. The building directory in the lobby said so. 1 to 12. Number 13. No hidden levels. No restricted access. Just 12 floors of offices, apartments, and quiet routines. But on the night security guard Daniel Reyes started his shift. He saw a button that wasn't supposed to exist. And once you saw it, you couldn't stop noticing it. Daniel had worked the night shift for 6 months. Graveyard hours. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most nights were quiet. Too quiet. Blackridge Tower emptied after 7 p.m., leaving only a handful of residents and a few overnight cleaners. The building felt different at night. The hallways stretched longer. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. And the elevator took just a little longer to arrive. But Daniel liked the silence. Until the night the button appeared. It started at 2:13 a.m. Daniel was finishing a routine floor check when he stepped into elevator B. He pressed L for lobby. The doors slid shut. The elevator began descending. Then it stopped. Between floors. The lights flickered once. And the panel beeped. Daniel frowned. Maintenance issue, he muttered. He looked at the button panel. That's when he saw it. A button labeled 13. Daniel stared at it. The button wasn't scratched. It wasn't broken. It looked exactly like the other buttons. Same shape. Same backlight. Same stainless steel ring. But he knew the building. There was no 13th floor. He pressed door open. Nothing happened. The elevator stayed still. Then the 13 button lit up. He hadn't touched it. The elevator began moving. But not up. Not down. Something else. The movement felt sideways. The cables groaned softly above the ceiling panel. Daniel's chest tightened. Elevators don't move sideways. The digital display changed. Instead of numbers, it showed a single symbol. Just a dash. The air inside the elevator grew colder. Daniel tried the emergency call button. No signal. No dial tone. Nothing. Then a voice spoke through the speaker. Soft. Calm. Almost welcoming. Welcome to floor 13. The elevator stopped. The doors opened slowly. Daniel didn't move. Because what he saw on the other side was impossible. The hallway outside looked exactly like Blackridge Tower. Same carpet. Same beige walls. Same apartment doors. But everything was slightly wrong. The hallway stretched too far. The ceiling lights were dimmer. And every door had the same number. 1301. Dozens of doors. All labeled 1301. Daniel stepped out slowly. The elevator doors remained open behind him. The air smelled stale. Like a room that hadn't been opened in years. He walked to the nearest door. He knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. Unlocked. The apartment inside was fully furnished. Couch. Table. Television. Kitchen appliances. Everything looked normal. Except for one thing. The television was already on. And it was showing security camera footage. From the elevator. Daniel watched himself standing in the hallway outside. Live. Real time. He turned slowly toward the screen. And the man on the television turned too. But the timing was off. By half a second. Hello? Daniel called. No answer. He stepped closer to the TV. The footage zoomed in slightly. Not with a camera movement. Automatically. Like something was watching him watch it. Then the screen changed. Now it showed the lobby. Empty. Except for one person. A security guard. Sitting at the desk. Daniel's stomach dropped. The guard on the screen was him. But Daniel was standing on the 13th floor. The television switched feeds again. Now it showed elevator B. Doors closed. Descending. Back to the lobby. The doors opened. The other Daniel stepped out. And sat down at the desk. Like nothing had happened. Behind Daniel. The apartment door slammed shut. He spun around. The hallway outside had changed. All the doors were open now. Every single one. And inside each apartment, a television glowed. All showing different moments from the building. Past moments. People entering. Leaving. Talking. Living their lives. Hundreds of recordings. Daniel stepped into the hallway. The elevator doors were closing. Wait, he shouted. He ran. But the doors sealed shut. And the elevator disappeared. The hallway lights dimmed further. and a soft voice echoed through the corridor, the same voice from the elevator. Observation complete. Daniel froze. Who's there? Silence. Then, new resident registered. The hallway televisions flickered simultaneously. Every screen changed. Now they all showed the same thing. Daniel, standing in the hallway, alone. One of the apartment doors creaked open wider. Inside, the television displayed a name. White letters on black. Daniel Reyes. Unit 1301. His chest tightened. I'm not staying here. The voice answered immediately. Residents do not leave floor 13. From the far end of the hallway, footsteps echoed. Slow. Heavy. Approaching. Daniel's heart pounded. He couldn't see anyone yet. Just the sound. Closer. Closer. Then a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. A man in a security uniform. Walking toward him. Daniel's blood ran cold. Because the man walking toward him was Daniel. The copy stopped about 10 feet away. Perfect posture. Perfect expression. Blank eyes. Welcome home, it said calmly. Daniel backed away. You're not me. The copy tilted its head slightly. Correction, you are the copy. The hallway lights flickered. All the televisions switched again. Now they showed one final image. The elevator panel. The 13 button glowing. Waiting. Daniel realized something terrible. The elevator wasn't broken. It was selecting people. And once it brought you to floor 13, someone else took your place. The copy of Daniel stepped closer. Your shift is over. Daniel whispered, what happens to me? The copy smiled faintly. You observe. Behind him, the apartment labeled 1301 slowly opened again. Inside, the television turned toward him, and the hallway voice spoke one last time. Welcome to the building. Daniel Reyes stood frozen in the endless hallway. The copy of him, wearing the exact same security uniform, had already turned away. Without another word, it walked toward the elevator that had brought Daniel here. The elevator doors opened instantly. The copy stepped inside. The 13 button went dark, and the doors closed. A moment later, Daniel heard the cables moving. Descending. Back to the real building. Back to Daniel's life. Daniel ran toward the elevator. Too late. The hallway swallowed the sound of the moving cables. The elevator was gone, and he was alone. Or so he thought. Behind him, a door creaked open. Daniel spun around. The apartment labeled 1301 across the hall had opened halfway. The television inside flickered with static. A voice whispered from the darkness inside. New arrival. Daniel stepped closer slowly. Hello. The voice came again. You shouldn't stand in the hallway. It watches the hallway. Daniel frowned. Who watches? No answer. Instead, the door opened wider. Come inside, the voice said, before it notices you're moving. Daniel stepped into the apartment cautiously. The moment he crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him. He jumped, but the voice inside spoke quickly. Relax. That's normal. The apartment lights flickered on. Daniel blinked in shock, because the room wasn't empty anymore. 3 people sat around the small living room, watching him. A woman in her early 40s leaned back in a chair. A teenage boy sat on the couch, and an elderly man stood near the window. None of them looked surprised. Just tired, like people who had been waiting a long time. The woman spoke first. Name? Daniel hesitated. Daniel Reyes. The teenage boy sighed. Security guard. Daniel's stomach tightened. How did you know? The woman gestured toward the television. The screen showed footage of the elevator. Daniel pressing lobby. Then the moment the 13 button lit up. We've been watching, she said. Daniel looked around the apartment again. Who are you people? The elderly man answered quietly. Residents. Daniel shook his head. No. The voice said residents don't leave. The old man gave a sad smile. That's correct. The woman stood and walked closer. I'm Lila Carter. She pointed at the boy. That's Marcus. Then she nodded toward the old man. And that's Walter. Marcus waved half-heartedly. Walter simply nodded. Daniel rubbed his face. This isn't real. Marcus laughed dryly. Everyone says that on the first night. Daniel turned to Lila. How long have you been here? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Come look. Daniel stepped beside her. Outside the window, the hallway continued, but the building exterior wasn't visible. No city lights, no streets, just an endless grid of hallways, stretching forever in every direction. Thousands of identical apartments, all labeled 1301. Daniel's throat went dry. This can't exist inside a building. Walter chuckled softly. It doesn't. Daniel turned sharply. What does that mean? Walter leaned on his cane. Floor 13 isn't a floor. It's a system. Marcus grabbed the remote and changed the television channel. The screen switched from the elevator camera to the lobby of Blackridge Tower. Daniel saw his copy sitting at the security desk, checking paperwork, answering the phone, living his life. Marcus pointed. That's you now. Daniel stared at the screen in horror. The copy smiled politely at a resident entering the building. It even laughed at something the resident said. Perfect. Natural. Indistinguishable. Daniel whispered, That's not me. Marcus shrugged. Tell that to everyone downstairs. Lila folded her arms. The elevator chooses replacements. Replacements for what? Daniel asked. Walter answered quietly. For people the building wants to keep. Daniel blinked. What does that mean? Lila walked to the kitchen and poured water into a glass. The building watches everything. Cameras, microphones, movement patterns. She handed him the glass. Eventually it selects someone. Daniel frowned. For what? Walter replied simply. Observation. Marcus changed the channel again. Now the television showed different residents inside the tower. People sleeping, watching TV, cooking dinner, normal life. Hundreds of camera angles. Every floor, every hallway, every apartment. Daniel whispered, It's spying on everyone. Walter shook his head slowly. Not spying. Studying. Daniel sat down heavily on the couch. Why replace people? Marcus leaned forward. Because someone has to stay here. Daniel looked around the room. You mean watch them? Marcus nodded. Forever. Daniel felt panic rising. There has to be a way out. Lila sighed. There isn't. Walter added quietly. Not through the elevator. Daniel looked at him sharply. Then how? Walter didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the hallway door. Everyone in the room fell silent. From outside, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Slow, heavy, identical to the footsteps Daniel had heard earlier. Marcus whispered, It's doing rounds. Daniel's pulse spiked. What is? Walter spoke in a low voice. The supervisor. The footsteps stopped outside the apartment door. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 The television screen turned black. White letters appeared. Resident count check. Daniel felt cold sweat down his neck. Lila whispered, Don't answer. Marcus nodded. It counts voices. The knocks came again. Louder this time. A voice spoke from the hallway. Deep. Mechanical. Unit 1301. State number of residents. Daniel's heart pounded. Walter held up 4 fingers silently. 4. Lila spoke toward the door calmly. 4 residents. Silence. Long silence. Daniel thought his heart might explode. Finally the voice answered. Confirmed. Footsteps resumed, moving down the hallway again. Farther. Farther. Until they disappeared completely. Marcus exhaled loudly. That was close. Daniel looked confused. Why? Marcus leaned back. Because if the count changes. Walter finished the sentence. Someone gets replaced. Daniel looked at the door again, his mind spinning. How many apartments are here? Walter answered quietly. Thousands. And how many supervisors? Walter shook his head. We've only ever seen one. Daniel whispered. And who made it? The 3 residents exchanged uneasy glances. Lila finally said the words none of them liked saying. We think. She hesitated. The elevator did. At that exact moment, the television flickered back on. The elevator camera feed appeared again. The panel inside the elevator lit up, and a new button glowed. 13. Someone else had just pressed it. Marcus leaned forward slowly. "Well," he muttered. "Looks like we're getting a new neighbor." Daniel stared at the screen. A woman stepped into the elevator, unaware. Just another resident heading home. The elevator doors closed. The 13 button stayed lit, and the cables began to move. The television flickered as the elevator descended. Inside the apartment, no one spoke. Daniel stared at the screen while the elevator camera showed a woman standing alone inside the metal box. Mid-30s, office clothes, a grocery bag in her hand. She looked tired, completely unaware. Marcus leaned forward. "Another one," he whispered. Daniel turned to Lila. "You're not going to warn her?" Lila didn't look at him. "You can't warn someone before they arrive." "Why not?" Walter answered quietly from the window. "Because the elevator decides first." On the television screen, the woman pressed floor 8. The elevator began rising. Normal. Routine. Just like Daniel's ride earlier that night. Then, the elevator stopped. Between floors, the lights flickered once. Daniel's chest tightened. "Here it comes," Marcus said softly. The elevator panel beeped. And slowly, a new button lit up. 13. The woman frowned. She leaned closer to the panel. Confused, Daniel watched her mouth move. She was saying the exact same words he had said. "There is no 13th floor." Then the elevator moved again. But the movement was wrong. The cables groaned. Metal shifted in ways elevators were never designed to move. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Sideways," he whispered. Marcus nodded. "Always sideways." The screen suddenly cut to static. The elevator camera disappeared. Lila stood immediately. "Turn it off." Marcus grabbed the remote and shut the television down. The room went quiet again. Daniel blinked. "Why did you turn it off?" Walter answered slowly. "Because the supervisor checks screens when someone arrives." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" Walter pointed toward the hallway door. "It means we stay quiet." Daniel listened. At first there was nothing. Then, a distant metallic sound. Elevator doors opening. Somewhere in the endless corridor, the woman had arrived. Marcus whispered, "She'll step out now." Daniel imagined it. The elevator doors sliding open. The strange hallway. The identical doors. The endless carpet. Just like he had seen. Footsteps echoed. Fast. Panicked. Running. The woman's voice screamed in the distance. "Hello? Is anyone here?" Daniel stood. Instinct. "I need to help her." Lila grabbed his arm hard. "No. She's terrified." Marcus shook his head urgently. "You open that door and we all disappear." Daniel stared at them. "You're just going to let her run around out there?" Walter spoke quietly. "She won't run for long." The footsteps grew louder. The woman was getting closer. Her voice cracked with fear. "Please, someone answer." Daniel moved toward the door. Lila blocked him. "You don't understand yet." "Understand what?" Walter looked directly at him. "The supervisor hears fear." The hallway suddenly went silent. Completely silent. Even the woman's footsteps stopped. Daniel felt the air pressure in the room change. Marcus whispered, "It's here." Daniel held his breath. Slow footsteps began again. But these weren't human. They were heavier. Measured. Each step perfectly spaced. The sound moved down the corridor. Closer. Closer. Then the woman screamed. A short scream. Cut off instantly. Daniel lunged for the door. Walter grabbed his shoulder with surprising strength. "Don't." Daniel struggled. What did it do to her? Walter's voice was calm. Listened. Something outside moved past the apartment door. Daniel froze. Because he could hear it breathing. Not loud. Not heavy. But wrong. Like air moving through a hollow machine. Then a voice spoke in the hallway. Flat. Mechanical. Resident acquisition complete. Marcus whispered, "That's new." Lila frowned. "It usually says correction." Walter's expression darkened. "That means something changed." The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. Everyone in the room went completely still. Then, a shadow appeared under the door. Too tall. Too wide. It blocked the hallway light entirely. 3 slow knocks. Knock. 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 Daniel's heart hammered. The voice outside spoke again. Unit 1301. State number of residents. Walter raised 4 fingers again. Lilo answered carefully. 4 residents. Silence. The shadow didn't move. For several long seconds nothing happened. Then the voice responded. Confirmed. The shadow moved away. Footsteps continued down the corridor, fading slowly. Only when the sound disappeared completely did anyone breathe again. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. That was close. Daniel turned to Walter. What is that thing? Walter walked slowly to the television. He turned it back on. The screen displayed hallway camera footage. Daniel felt his stomach drop, because the hallway cameras existed here too. The screen showed the corridor outside their apartment, and walking down the hallway was the supervisor. Daniel stared in horror. The creature was nearly 7 feet tall. Its body was shaped like a man wearing a maintenance uniform, but its limbs were too long. Its back bent slightly forward, and where its face should have been, there was only smooth metal, polished like a mirror. Daniel whispered, "That's not human." Walter nodded. "No." Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "And look what it's carrying." The supervisor held something in one hand, a security badge, and a grocery bag. The exact bag the woman had carried into the elevator. The camera zoomed in. Not automatically. Something else was controlling it. The screen flickered again, and suddenly the footage changed. Now it showed the elevator panel. Inside the real building, the 13 button glowed again. Daniel's chest tightened. Another one already. Walter shook his head slowly. "No." Marcus whispered the truth. "That's not someone coming up." Daniel frowned. "Then what is it?" Marcus pointed at the screen. The camera zoomed further, and Daniel saw something that made his blood run cold. The finger pressing the 13 button was mechanical. Metal. Long. Inhuman. Walter's voice was barely audible. The supervisor doesn't just patrol the hallway. It controls the elevator. Daniel's mind raced. "You mean, it chooses who comes here?" Walter nodded. "Yes." Daniel asked the question none of them wanted answered. "Why?" Walter turned off the television again. The room went dark except for a small lamp. He looked at Daniel carefully. Because the number of residents must always stay balanced. Daniel frowned. Balanced with what? Walter's voice dropped to a whisper. With the building. From somewhere deep in the endless halls, the elevator cables began moving again. Another arrival. Or another correction. On floor 13. Those two things were the same. Daniel didn't sleep. None of them did. On floor 13, sleep was dangerous. Because when you slept, the hallway changed. The apartment remained dimly lit while the television stayed off. Lila sat at the kitchen table staring at the blank screen. Marcus lay on the couch, restless. Walter stood at the window like he always did, watching the endless grid of hallways outside. Daniel paced the room. "Someone has to do something," he said. Marcus sighed. "You're still in the fight the system phase." Daniel stopped. "And you in the give up forever phase." Marcus didn't respond. Walter finally turned away from the window. "There is something we do." Daniel looked hopeful. "What?" Walter pointed toward the hallway door. "We observe the changes." Daniel frowned. "What changes?" Lila stood and walked toward a small wooden cabinet beside the TV. She opened it. Inside were dozens of notebooks, carefully labeled. Dates, times, numbers, years. Daniel blinked. "You've been documenting this place." Marcus sat up. "For as long as we've been here." Walter added quietly, "Which for me has been 16 years. Daniel stared at him. "You've been trapped here 16 years. Walter nodded. "According to the building's time." Daniel rubbed his temples. "This doesn't make sense. You don't age 16 years in 16 years. Walter smiled faintly. "You do here." Marcus spoke from the couch. "But the building downstairs only lost you tonight." Daniel's stomach tightened. "So my copy could live my entire life down there." Lila nodded. "And no one would know the difference." Daniel sat down heavily. The reality was starting to sink in. This place wasn't temporary. It wasn't a glitch. It was permanent. Unless they found another way out. Walter walked to the cabinet and pulled out a notebook. He flipped through pages filled with diagrams, maps of hallways, apartment numbers, strange symbols. Daniel leaned closer. These aren't all 1301. Walter nodded. Exactly. Daniel frowned. I thought every door here was the same. Marcus shook his head. That's what the hallway wants you to think. Lila stepped beside them. But some doors are different. Daniel pointed to the map. Like these. Walter tapped a circle on the page. Yes. Written beside it was a number. 1313. Daniel looked up. There are other apartment numbers. Walter nodded slowly. But they don't appear every day. Marcus added. They move. Daniel frowned deeper. Move. Walter turned the notebook so Daniel could see. Every map showed a different hallway layout. Different doors. Different placements. Floor 13 rearranges itself, Walter explained. Every night. Daniel leaned back. That's impossible. Marcus shrugged. So is the elevator. Lila closed the notebook. The important thing is that certain doors appear during the shifts. Daniel asked the obvious question. What's inside them? No one answered immediately. Walter finally spoke. Things the building hides. Marcus looked uneasy. Some of them are empty. Some of them are storage. And some. He hesitated. Some of them watch you. Daniel felt a cold knot in his chest. What does that mean? Walter looked directly at him. It means those apartments contain things that didn't follow the rules. Daniel stood again. What rules? Lilo answered bluntly. Don't leave your assigned apartment. Don't answer the hallway when it speaks. Don't open unknown doors. Marcus added quietly, and never look at the supervisor's face. Daniel blinked. But it doesn't have a face. Marcus shook his head slowly. That's what it wants you to believe. A sudden metallic sound echoed through the hallway. All four residents froze. The elevator. It had arrived again. Marcus whispered, That's the third arrival tonight. Walter frowned. That's not normal. They turned on the television. The elevator camera flickered to life. But something was wrong. The doors were already open. And the elevator was empty. Daniel frowned. No one's there. Walter leaned closer to the screen. That's impossible. Marcus whispered. It never comes up empty. Suddenly, the elevator doors slammed shut. The camera cut to static. Then the screen switched to a hallway camera. Not their hallway. Another one. Far away. Daniel stared at the screen. Because the hallway on the camera looked different. The doors weren't labeled 1301. They had real numbers. Walter's face went pale. No. Lila whispered. That hallway shouldn't exist. Daniel turned. What hallway is that? Marcus answered slowly. The hidden corridor. The camera zoomed in on one door. The number on it read 1313. Daniel leaned forward. That's the one in your notebook. Walter nodded grimly. Yes. Marcus swallowed hard. That door hasn't appeared in years. Daniel asked quietly. What's inside? Walter answered with a single word. Exit. Daniel stood instantly. Then let's go. Marcus grabbed his arm. Are you insane? If it's an exit. Walter interrupted. It's not an exit for us. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Walter stared at the screen. The last person who opened 1313. He hesitated. Created the supervisor. Silence filled the apartment. Daniel whispered. You're saying someone built that thing? Walter shook his head slowly. No. Someone became it. On the television screen. The door labeled 1313 slowly creaked open. From inside the dark apartment, a long metal hand reached out and pulled the door wider. Marcus whispered in horror. That's not supposed to happen. Daniel stared at the screen, because the thing stepping out of apartment 1313 was another supervisor. Two of them now walked the endless halls, and somewhere in the building, the elevator button for 13 lit up again. For several seconds, no one in the apartment spoke. The television screen glowed in the dark living room, and on it, two supervisors walked the endless corridors of floor 13. Daniel felt his pulse hammering in his ears. That shouldn't be possible, he whispered. Walter didn't answer, because he already knew the truth. It was possible, and it was happening. On the screen, the hallway camera followed the first supervisor, the one they had known for years. Tall, mechanical, its mirrored face reflecting the dim hallway lights as it moved with slow, perfect steps. But behind it, the second one emerged from apartment 1313. Its body looked almost identical, but something about it was wrong. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. You see that? Daniel nodded slowly. The second supervisor didn't walk smoothly. Its movements were uneven, jerky, like something learning how to move for the first time. Walter's voice was barely audible. It's new. Lila crossed her arms. That means the building created another one. Marcus shook his head. No. He pointed at the screen again. The building doesn't create them. Daniel turned. Then what does? Marcus swallowed. The residents do. Daniel looked between them. You said the last person who opened apartment 1313 became the supervisor. Walter nodded. Yes. Daniel looked back at the screen. So someone opened that door tonight. Or something did, Lila said quietly. On the television, the first supervisor suddenly stopped walking. Its head tilted slightly, as if it had heard something. Then, slowly, it turned around, facing the second supervisor standing down the corridor. The hallway camera flickered. For the first time since Daniel arrived, the two supervisors looked directly at each other. Marcus whispered, "Oh no." Daniel frowned. What? Marcus leaned back nervously. They've never had to share the floor before. The first supervisor stepped forward. Its metal boots echoed down the hallway. The second supervisor stepped forward too, but its movements were still strange. Its arms twitched slightly. Its head jerked left and right, like a broken machine trying to stabilize. Walter's expression darkened. It's unstable. Daniel asked quietly, what happens if two supervisors exist? Walter answered with a single word. Correction. The first supervisor stopped 10 feet away from the second. For a moment, neither moved. Then both of them spoke at the exact same time. Their voices echoed through the hallway speakers. Flat, cold, identical. Resident balance compromised. Marcus cursed under his breath. Daniel's stomach tightened. What does that mean? Lilo answered quickly. It means the system thinks the floor has too many variables. Walter finished the thought, so it starts removing them. Daniel looked at the door nervously. You mean us? Walter nodded slowly. Yes. Suddenly, the television screen changed again. The cameras switched to a map of floor 13. A grid of hallways and apartment doors. Daniel leaned closer. Red lights began blinking across the map. Marcus whispered, "That's not good." Daniel pointed. "What are those?" Marcus answered quietly, "Residents." Each red dot marked an apartment where someone lived. Dozens of them, spread across the endless corridors. Then, a mechanical voice filled the room. It came from the television. Correction protocol initiated. One of the red dots disappeared. Then another. Then another. Daniel stared in horror. Are they killing them? Walter shook his head slowly. Not exactly. Marcus added grimly. They're replacing them. The camera switched back to hallway footage. Daniel watched as the first supervisor knocked on an apartment door. 3 knocks. Just like before. The voice spoke again. State number of residents. A frightened voice answered from inside. 2. Pause. Confirmed. The door opened. The supervisor stepped inside. The camera feed cut to black. Marcus looked sick. That apartment used to have 4. Daniel's voice trembled. Where did the other 2 go? Walter answered quietly. Nowhere. On the other side of the floor. The second supervisor knocked on another door. But its voice came out distorted. Glitching. ST, state NU, number of residents. The door inside opened slowly. Someone peeked out. The second supervisor grabbed them instantly, dragging them into the hallway. The person screamed. The sound cut off abruptly. Daniel felt cold all over. That thing's malfunctioning. Walter nodded. Yes. And that's worse. Marcus pointed at the television again. Look. The floor map returned. More red dots vanished. The system was correcting faster now. 2 supervisors meant double the patrols, double the corrections, double the disappearances. Daniel's mind raced. There's to be a way to stop them. Walter turned to him. There might be. Marcus frowned. Wait. What? Walter walked slowly toward the cabinet again. He opened a drawer and removed another notebook. This one was older. Much older. The pages were yellow. Daniel leaned closer. What's that? Walter flipped to a specific page. A map of the hidden corridor. And the door labeled 1313. Walter tapped the page. This door doesn't just create supervisors. Daniel frowned. What else does it do? Walter looked directly at him. It's the control room. Marcus stared at him. You never told us that. Walter sighed. Because it's suicide. Lila nodded slowly. No one who enters that apartment comes back. Daniel looked at the television again. More red dots disappearing. More residents gone. More corrections happening. He made his decision. I'm going. Marcus stood up immediately. Absolutely not. Daniel turned. If that room controls the system, it's the only way to stop them. Walter didn't argue. Instead he asked one question. Do you understand what opening that door means? Daniel nodded. Yes. Walter's voice was quiet. You might become the next supervisor. Daniel looked at the hallway door. Then back at the screen. 2 metal figures walking the corridors. Erasing people. Correcting lives. Maintaining balance. Daniel took a deep breath. Then I'll make sure there's never another one again. Outside the apartment. Heavy footsteps echoed in the distance. 2 different directions. 2 different supervisors. Both getting closer. Marcus whispered nervously. We're running out of time. Walter closed the notebook slowly, then looked at Daniel. Good. Because the hidden corridor only appears when the system is breaking. On the television screen, the map shifted again, and one hallway turned red. A new door appeared, the number on it glowing clearly. 1313. Walter whispered the words Daniel had been waiting to hear. There it is. The red hallway pulsed on the television screen. Apartment 1313 had appeared. Walter stared at the map like a man seeing a ghost. It's closer than usual, he said. Marcus looked nervous. How close? Walter traced a path across the screen. 3 corridors west. Then 1 turn north. Daniel stood. That's not far. Marcus grabbed his jacket. It's far enough to die. The heavy footsteps of the supervisors echoed somewhere outside their hallway. Closer than before. Daniel felt the building vibrating slightly beneath his feet. Floor 13 was changing again. The hallways always shifted when the system entered correction mode. Lila walked to the apartment door. She pressed her ear against it, listening. The corridor outside was quiet. For now. She turned back. We have maybe 5 minutes before one of them patrols this sector. Marcus cursed. 5 minutes to reach a door that turns people into machines. Daniel grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen counter. Then we shouldn't waste them. Walter opened the door slowly. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions. The familiar patterned carpet. The dim yellow lights. The identical doors marked 1301. But something felt different now. The air felt colder, more mechanical, like the building itself had become alert. They stepped into the corridor. Walter closed the door behind them quietly. Marcus whispered, "If we see a supervisor, we run." Daniel frowned. "Run where?" Marcus didn't answer, because there was nowhere to run. They moved quickly through the hallway, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The corridor stretched longer than Daniel remembered. The building was expanding again, adding distance, trying to slow them down. They turned the first corner. Daniel's heart jumped, because the hallway ahead glowed red. The emergency lights above flickered softly, and at the end of the corridor, there it was, apartment 1313. The door looked different from the others. It was darker, older. Its number plate was metal instead of plastic, and the handle looked like an elevator button. Marcus whispered nervously, "I don't like this." Walter nodded. "You're not supposed to." They walked closer. The hallway felt silent. Too silent. Daniel reached the door first. He placed his hand on the metal handle. It felt warm, like something had been touching it recently. Marcus, step back. Before you open that. Daniel looked at him. Marcus continued quietly. If you become the next supervisor. He didn't finish the sentence. Daniel understood. You'll shut the door behind me. Walter stepped forward. No. Everyone looked at him. Walter's voice was calm. We all go in. Marcus blinked. That wasn't the plan. Walter pointed at the hallway. The plan changed when the second supervisor appeared. Lila nodded slowly. His right. Marcus sighed heavily. Fine. He gestured at the door. Let's meet the brain of the nightmare. Daniel turned the handle. The door opened. The room inside was enormous. Far larger than any apartment could be. Daniel stepped inside slowly. And his breath caught. Because the room wasn't an apartment at all. It was a control center. Thousands of monitors filled the walls. Screens showing hallway cameras, elevator cameras, apartment cameras, every corner of floor 13, every resident, every movement. Rows of computers hummed quietly. Machines connected by thick cables that ran into the ceiling and walls. The entire building was wired into this room. Marcus stared in disbelief. This isn't a haunted floor. Walter finished the thought. It's a system. Daniel walked further inside. The center of the room held a single chair. Metal, connected to wires. And above it, a helmet-like device filled with sensors and cables. Daniel's stomach dropped. That's how they control it. Walter nodded. Yes. Lila approached one of the screens. It displayed the elevator panel. The glowing 13 button. She whispered, "This room chooses who gets brought here." Marcus scrolled through another console. His eyes widened. Oh my God. Daniel looked over. What? Marcus turned the monitor toward them. A list of names filled the screen. Hundreds of them. Every resident currently trapped on floor 13. Daniel saw his own name. Daniel Carter, new resident. Status, unverified. Marcus scrolled further down. Older entries appeared. Names marked with a different status. Converted. Daniel felt a chill. Converted into what? Walter pointed toward the helmet. Supervisors. Daniel's mind raced. So the building doesn't create them. Walter nodded. It recruits them. Suddenly, a loud metallic sound echoed behind them. The door to apartment 1313 slammed shut. Marcus spun around. That's not good. The monitors flickered. Every screen turned red. A mechanical voice filled the control room. Unauthorized access detected. Lila whispered. It knows we're here. The hallway cameras appeared again on the screens. Daniel felt his heart stop. Because both supervisors were moving quickly now. Running. Toward their location. Marcus pointed at the control chair. You need to shut the system down. Daniel stared at the helmet. You mean sit in that thing? Walter nodded slowly. It's the only way. Daniel's voice was quiet. And if it turns me into the next supervisor? Walter answered honestly. Then the rest of us will destroy the system. The footsteps outside the hallway grew louder. Heavy. Fast. 2 machines approaching. Marcus looked at Daniel urgently. You have maybe 30 seconds. Lila added softly. If you're going to save everyone on this floor. She gestured toward the chair. That's the price. Daniel stared at the helmet. The cables. The monitors. The entire nightmare controlled from one seat. Outside the door. 3 loud knocks echoed. Knock. 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 The supervisor's voice spoke. State number of residents. Daniel took a deep breath. Then sat in the chair. And placed the helmet over his head. Every screen in the control room exploded with light. And suddenly, Daniel could see the entire building. Every hallway. Every door. Every resident. And both supervisors. Standing outside the door. A new voice echoed inside his mind. Cold. Mechanical. But familiar. Welcome, Administrator. Darkness disappeared. Light exploded across Daniel's mind. It wasn't like looking at screens anymore. It was like becoming the building itself. Every hallway. Every apartment door. Every camera. Every elevator cable. Daniel could see all of it at once. Thousands of images flooded his mind simultaneously. His brain struggled to process it. A mechanical voice echoed inside his thoughts. Administrator connection established. Daniel tried to speak, but his mouth didn't move. Instead, his thoughts became the commands. Where am I? The system responded instantly. Control node, floor 13. Daniel felt the building breathing around him. He could feel the elevators moving, residents walking, doors opening and closing, even the distant hum of electricity in the walls. Everything connected to him, everything visible. He searched for the door of 1313. Immediately, the hallway appeared in his vision. Two supervisors stood outside the control room, motionless, waiting. Their mirrored faces reflected the hallway lights. One of them knocked again. 3 metallic knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The mechanical voice echoed. State number of residents. Inside the room behind Daniel, Walter, Marcus, and Lila were frozen in silence, watching the door tremble slightly with each knock. Marcus whispered nervously, "He better hurry." Inside the system, Daniel tried to move, tried to understand the controls. The building responded to thought. He focused on the hallway door. Immediately, a command panel appeared in his mind. Security options. Lock. Unlock. Observe. Correct. Daniel felt a cold chill. Correct. That was the word the supervisors used. He ignored it. Instead he thought clearly. Locked door. The hallway door of 1313 sealed instantly. Thick metal plates slid into place from the walls. Outside, the supervisors stopped knocking. Inside the room, Marcus stared. Did that just happen? Walter nodded slowly. Yes. Lila whispered. He's controlling it. But Daniel felt something else now. A presence. Another consciousness inside the system. Watching him. The voice spoke again inside his mind. Not the cold mechanical one. A different voice. Human. Calm. Familiar. You shouldn't have sat in that chair. Daniel froze. Who are you? The answer came immediately. The first administrator. Suddenly the screens in Daniel's mind shifted. A memory appeared. Old footage. Grainy. Black and white. A man sitting in the same control chair. Decades ago. Connected to the same helmet. The man spoke softly to someone off camera. We finally solved the problem. Daniel focused on the man's face. The system labeled him instantly. Administrator, Dr. Arthur Hale. Status, converted. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. You built this place. The voice responded calmly. Yes. The memory continued playing. Dr. Hale stood beside a large architectural model of Blackridge Tower. He spoke proudly. Human observation is inefficient. People forget things. Cameras don't. He tapped the model. But cameras still require operators. Daniel realized what he was hearing. The origin story. Hale continued speaking in the recording. So we created a closed system. A place where observers could live permanently. A floor outside the normal building structure. Daniel felt horror rising. You built a prison. Hale's voice answered calmly. No. I built a perfect surveillance network. The memory shifted. Now showing the first resident arriving. Confused. Frightened. Just like Daniel. Hale watched from the control chair. Recording everything. Studying behavior. Collecting data. Daniel's thoughts raced. You trapped people here to study them. Hale responded coldly. To improve society. Daniel's mind burned with anger. And the supervisors? Hale answered. Necessary maintenance. The memory jumped forward again. Years passing. More residents arriving. More observers watching. Until finally, Hale himself aged. His body weakening. But the system needed an administrator. Forever. Daniel understood now. Hale had entered the control chair permanently. Connecting his mind to the system. Becoming the building. You're the voice. Hale confirmed calmly. Yes. Daniel's thoughts sharpened. Then why let me in? Hale paused. For the first time. The voice sounded uncertain. Because something changed. The monitors inside Daniel's mind showed the hallway again. The two supervisors. Standing outside the locked door. Hale continued. There has never been more than one supervisor. Daniel realized the truth. You didn't create the second one. Hale answered slowly. No. Daniel felt the building tremble again. The hallways shifting. The system destabilizing. Hale spoke again. The floor is evolving. Daniel focused deeper into the system, searching through data, logs, commands. Then he found it. A recent entry. Unauthorized conversion detected. Origin unknown. Supervisor unit unregistered. Daniel felt a cold wave wash through him. Something else created that supervisor. Hale responded quietly. Yes. Inside the room behind him. Marcus looked at the sealed door nervously. Why aren't they leaving? Walter stared at the metal barrier. Because they are waiting. Lila whispered. For the system to open it. Inside Daniel's mind, the building map suddenly flashed red. Another apartment appeared on the floor. A new number. 1314. Daniel froze. That apartment wasn't there before. Hale's voice became tense. No, it wasn't. The door of apartment 1314 slowly opened on the hallway camera. Something moved inside the darkness. Something tall. Something metallic. But it didn't look like the supervisors. Daniel felt a new presence enter the system. Not human. Not mechanical. Something else. The voice inside his mind spoke again. But this time, it wasn't Hale. And it wasn't the system. It was deeper, colder, older, and it whispered only one sentence. You opened the wrong door. Daniel felt the system tremble. Not physically, but structurally, like a network receiving a signal it didn't recognize. The new apartment, 1314, remained open on the hallway cameras. Darkness filled the doorway. No lights inside. No movement. But the system was reacting to it. Inside Daniel's mind, the building map flickered. Sections of floor 13 shifted slightly. Corridors stretching. Rooms rearranging. The architecture rewriting itself. Dr. Hale's voice spoke again. For the first time since Daniel connected. It sounded afraid. That apartment shouldn't exist. Daniel focused on it. Then how did it appear? Hale hesitated. I don't know. Daniel searched deeper in the system. Administrative logs. Architectural data. Original construction blueprints. The files appeared instantly in his mind. But something strange happened. The blueprint for floor 13 didn't load. Instead, an error appeared. File origin unknown. Daniel frowned. Unknown. Hale's voice lowered. Show me. Daniel opened the file. Instead of blueprints, a photograph appeared. Black and white. Old. Very old. The image showed an empty concrete floor. No walls. No apartments. Just an unfinished level of a building. The year printed on the corner. 1952. Daniel searched again. Another image appeared. Workers standing on that same floor. But something was different. In the center of the room, a doorway stood alone. A single door frame with no walls around it. And the number above it read 13. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. This existed before the building was finished. Hale answered slowly. Yes. The memory continued. Young Dr. Arthur Hale stood beside the construction crew. He looked fascinated. Obsessed. A worker in the photograph pointed at the doorway nervously. Daniel could hear the conversation through the archived audio. Worker, sir, this door wasn't here yesterday. Hale stepped closer to it, examining it carefully. Hale's younger voice responded calmly. Every building needs access points. Daniel understood now. Hale hadn't built floor 13. He had discovered it, and then built the system around it. Inside the control room behind Daniel, Walter suddenly looked up. Something changed. Marcus turned. What? Walter pointed at the monitors. The hallway cameras were glitching. The lights flickered across multiple corridors. Lila whispered nervously. Daniel, hurry. Inside the system, Daniel looked again at apartment 1314. Something moved inside the doorway. Slowly, a tall figure stepped forward. But it wasn't metal like the supervisors. It wasn't human either. Its shape seemed wrong. Like a shadow trying to imitate a person. Hale's voice spoke sharply. Do not open that door. Daniel frowned. I didn't. Hale's voice dropped. But the system did. On the hallway cameras, the two supervisors suddenly turned. both of them now facing apartment 1314, their mirrored faces reflecting the dark doorway. Then they spoke together. Unauthorized structure detected. The shadow inside the apartment moved again, stretching unnaturally, like a silhouette pulled across the wall. Daniel felt something strange. The system was trying to scan it, but failing. Error messages flooded his mind. Entity undefined. Entity undefined. Entity undefined. Daniel whispered in his thoughts. What is that thing? Hale's answer came slowly. I don't know. Daniel felt a chill. You built this entire system and you don't know? Hale's voice became quiet. No. I built the cage. The shadow stepped fully into the hallway, and the cameras distorted instantly. Its body looked vaguely human. Tall. Long arms. But its edges blurred like smoke. And where its face should be, there was only darkness. The supervisors stepped forward. Their voices echoed again. Correction required. They began walking toward the figure. Mechanical. Precise. Designed to remove anomalies. But the shadow didn't move. It simply stood there, watching them, waiting. Then it spoke. The voice echoed through every hallway speaker on floor 13. And inside Daniel's mind, the voice sounded ancient, deep, and calm. You built your system inside my door. Daniel froze. Your door? The shadow tilted its head slightly. You call it a flaw. But this place existed long before your building. Hale's voice suddenly panicked. Daniel, disconnect from the system. Daniel ignored him. What are you? The shadow answered simply. I am the reason doors exist. The two supervisors reached it. They raised their mechanical arms, preparing to restrain it. But before they could touch it, the hallway lights exploded, glass shattered, every camera flickered, and both supervisors froze, completely motionless, like puppets with their strings cut. The shadow stepped closer to them, studying them, curious. Then it spoke softly. You turned observers into machines. Daniel felt the system struggling, trying to regain control, trying to reassert authority. But it couldn't. The shadow turned slowly, looking directly into the hallway camera, which meant looking directly at Daniel. Through the system, through the building, through the chair. Daniel felt its attention enter the control room. It could see him. Inside the system, inside the chair, inside the building. The shadow spoke again, and this time the words were meant only for him. You replaced the last one. Daniel's mind raced. The last one? The shadow answered. The one who built the cage. Hale's voice shouted inside Daniel's mind. Don't listen to it. But the shadow continued calmly. You think you control this place? The shadow raised one long arm, pointing toward apartment 1313, toward the control room, toward Daniel. Then it spoke the sentence that made Daniel's blood run cold. You are only the newest resident. The building shook violently, lights bursting across the floor, walls shifting, doors appearing and disappearing. Inside the control room, Marcus grabbed the desk. What is happening? Walter stared at the monitors in horror. Something just took control of the system. Inside Daniel's mind, the shadow's voice whispered one final thing. Now we decide what to do with the building. The building screamed, not with sound, but with movement. Inside Daniel's mind, the entire system fractured into chaos. Hallways stretched, doors vanished. New corridors formed where none had existed before. The architecture of floor 13 was collapsing. Or worse, transforming. Daniel struggled inside the control chair. The helmet burned against his temples. Thousands of signals flooded his mind. Every sensor in the building firing at once. Every camera feeding him images. Residents running through hallways. Doors slamming. Lights bursting. Inside the control room, Marcus grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from falling. What the hell is happening? Walter stared at the monitors. The system is losing structure. Lila whispered. Or something else is rewriting it. Inside Daniel's mind, Dr. Hale's voice shouted urgently. You need to shut the system down. Daniel clenched his thoughts together. I can't. Hale demanded. Why not? Daniel answered slowly. Because it's not my system anymore. Across the building, the ancient shadow moved through the hallway. The two supervisors stood frozen behind it, powerless, disconnected, like broken machines. The shadow studied the building curiously, almost like a scientist examining a cage. Its voice echoed through the speakers again. You built walls inside my doorway. The lights flickered violently. Now the doorway is opening again. Suddenly, apartment doors began unlocking all over the floor. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Residents stepped into the hallways in confusion. They saw something impossible. The corridors were no longer stable. Some stretched endlessly. Others ended abruptly in blank walls. A few revealed staircases that had never existed before. Walter pointed at the monitor. Look. Marcus turned. A massive crack appeared in the digital floor map, right through the center of floor 13. The structure was splitting. Daniel felt the building fighting to maintain itself. The system still existed, but it was losing control. The ancient entity was rewriting parts of it, using the architecture like clay. Dr. Hale's voice spoke again, angrier now. This floor was designed for observation. Daniel snapped back mentally. You designed the surveillance, not the floor. Daniel focused his thoughts deeper, searching beyond the modern system, beyond Hale's programming, into the original structure, into the thing Hale had discovered decades ago. The system showed him something hidden, a layer beneath the building's architecture, something older, something the cameras couldn't fully map. The true shape of floor 13. Daniel saw it clearly now. Floor 13 wasn't a normal level. It wasn't a set of hallways and apartments. It was a doorway space, a place between locations, a gap between structures, a corridor between realities. And the building above it, Blackridge Tower, had accidentally sealed the doorway, turning it into a prison. The shadow spoke again inside Daniel's mind. You understand now. Daniel answered carefully. This floor wasn't meant to hold people. The shadow replied. No, it was meant to connect places. Inside the control room, Walter looked at the monitors in shock. Residents are disappearing. Marcus blinked. What do you mean disappearing? Walter zoomed the camera feed. A man ran down a hallway, and suddenly stepped through a doorway that hadn't existed before. Then he vanished. Gone. Lila whispered. The floor is reopening. Inside Daniel's mind, Dr. Hale shouted again. Stop it. Daniel turned his thoughts toward him. You trapped hundreds of people here. Hale responded coldly. They were necessary variables. Daniel felt anger burn through the connection. They were prisoners. The shadow interrupted calmly. You both misunderstand. Daniel froze. What do you mean? The shadow answered simply. This place was never meant to be closed. The system map fractured again. Huge sections of floor 13 vanished. New rooms formed in impossible shapes. Staircases led upward into darkness. Elevators appeared where none existed before. Marcus grabbed Walter's shoulder. The exit elevator. Walter checked the cameras. The elevator Daniel had arrived in, the one with the glowing 13 button, had reappeared, right in the center of the floor. Lila whispered, It's letting people leave. Daniel saw it too. Dozens of residents were now running toward it, desperate, terrified, finally seeing a way out. But something else appeared on the system map. Apartment 1314 expanded, growing larger, the doorway widening, darkness spilling into the hallways. Daniel felt the ancient presence watching him again. You must choose. Daniel answered slowly. Choose what? The shadow replied calmly. You can restore the cage, or you can open the doorway. Dr. Hale screamed inside Daniel's mind. Close the system. You'll destroy the building. Daniel realized something important. Hale wasn't worried about the residents. He was worried about losing control. Marcus shouted from the control room. Daniel. The door behind them shook violently. The two supervisors were moving again, trying to break through the metal seal. Walter looked terrified. They're overriding the lock. Inside Daniel's mind, the system timer flashed. Control collapse imminent. The shadow spoke one final time. Quiet. Patient. If the doorway fully opens, this floor will disappear. Daniel understood. Floor 13 had never been a floor. It had been a doorway that humans accidentally sealed, and now it was reopening. But if it fully opened, Blackridge Tower itself might collapse. Inside the control room, Marcus shouted again. Daniel, we're out of time. The metal door behind them began bending inward. The supervisors were almost inside. Inside the system, Daniel saw the final command panel. Two options flashing in front of him. Reinforced structure. Open doorway. Dr. Hale shouted desperately. Save the building. The shadow whispered calmly. Free the doorway. Daniel closed his eyes and made his choice. The system waited. Two commands floated inside Daniel's mind. Reinforced structure. Open doorway. The building trembled around him. Somewhere far above, thousands of unaware residents in Blackridge Tower lived normal lives. Sleeping, watching television, cooking dinner. They had no idea that an entire hidden floor beneath them was collapsing into something impossible. Inside the control room behind Daniel, Marcus slammed his fist against the metal desk. Daniel, we need to leave. Walter stared at the monitor in terror. The hallway camera showed the two supervisors tearing the door apart. Metal warped. Bolts snapped. They were seconds away from entering. Lila looked directly at Daniel's frozen body in the chair. Whatever you're doing, do it now. Inside the system, Dr. Hale screamed inside Daniel's mind. Choose the first option. Reinforce the structure. You'll destroy the entire tower if you open the doorway. Daniel asked one quiet question. How many people did you trap here? Hale hesitated, then answered. 218. Daniel felt the number echo through him. 218 lives. Watched. Controlled. Observed. For decades. The Shadow's voice returned. Calm. Ancient. Doors exist to be opened. Daniel breathed slowly. And cages exist to be broken. He made his choice. Open doorway. The system responded instantly. Every screen in the control room exploded with light. The entire building shuddered violently. Marcus grabbed the desk again. What did he just do? Walter stared at the monitors. His voice barely worked. He opened it. Across floor 13. The walls cracked. The ceilings split. The architecture that had held the space together for decades began collapsing. Not falling, but dissolving. The hallways stretched into darkness. Apartments twisted and folded like paper. The hidden floor was tearing itself apart. Residents ran toward the elevator. Some reached it. Some disappeared through new doorways forming in the air itself. Doors that led to places no one understood. Inside the control room, the metal door finally burst open. The two supervisors stepped inside, their mirrored faces reflecting the chaos. One of them spoke. Administrator command rejected. Walter backed away slowly. Marcus grabbed a metal chair. This isn't happening. The second supervisor spoke. System stability failure detected. Correction required. They began walking toward Daniel. Inside Daniel's mind, Dr. Hale screamed in rage. You fool! You've destroyed everything. Daniel answered calmly. No. I ended it. The ancient shadow appeared again inside the system, standing in the expanding darkness of apartment 1314. Watching the doorway open wider, the shadow spoke softly. The cage is breaking. The building shook harder. Cracks spread through the walls of the control room. Lights burst overhead. The floor tilted slightly. Marcus shouted, "The building is collapsing." Walter stared at the monitors. No. He pointed at the screen. Only floor 13. Inside Daniel's mind, the entire system was dissolving. Programs shutting down. Cameras going dark. Security locks failing. The artificial floor Hale had built was disappearing. But beneath it, something vast opened. The true doorway. A space between places. The shadow turned toward Daniel one final time. You have restored what was hidden. Daniel asked quietly. What happens now? The shadow answered simply. The door remains. The control chair suddenly released him. The helmet lifted from Daniel's head. He gasped as reality rushed back. The control room around him was breaking apart. Chunks of ceiling falling. Walls cracking open. Through the cracks, Daniel could see something impossible. Not another hallway. Not another room. But endless darkness. Like the building had opened into space itself. Marcus grabbed Daniel's arm. Move. The supervisors lunged forward. But the floor beneath them suddenly split apart. A massive fracture tore through the room. The machines fell into the darkness below, vanishing instantly. Walter pointed toward the hallway. The elevator. The four of them ran. The corridor was barely recognizable now. Walls twisting, doors floating in empty space, the floor splitting behind them. And there, standing in the center of the collapsing level, was the elevator, the one with the glowing 13 button. Its doors open. Waiting. They ran inside. Marcus slammed the button for the lobby. The doors closed just as the hallway behind them shattered completely. The elevator began moving, but not upward. At least not at first. Daniel felt something strange, like the elevator was passing through places. Not floors, places. For a brief moment, the doors flickered open. Daniel saw something impossible. A hallway that didn't belong to the building. A street, a forest, an ocean shoreline. Then the doors closed again, and the elevator continued rising. Finally, with a quiet ding, the doors opened. The lobby of Blackridge Tower. Normal, bright, peaceful. Marcus stepped out slowly. We made it. Walter looked back at the elevator panel. The 13 button was gone. Completely gone. Lila whispered, "The floor." Daniel answered quietly, "It never existed." Outside, police cars surrounded the building. Emergency lights flashing. Residents crowding the street. No one understood what had just happened. Later that night, authorities searched the building records. Construction documents. Architectural blueprints. Inspection reports. There was no floor 13. No hidden level. No apartment 1313. No control room. Nothing. And yet, 218 people who had been missing for decades suddenly appeared again. Confused. Terrified. But alive. Weeks later, Daniel stood across the street from Blackridge Tower, watching the lights in its windows. The building looked completely normal, like nothing had ever happened. Marcus joined him quietly. "You ever think about it?" Daniel nodded. "Every day." Marcus asked one final question. "Do you think the door is still out there?" Daniel looked up at the night sky, and remembered the shadow's final words. "The door remains." Daniel answered softly, "I don't think doors like that ever close."